Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, which is how GIS can enhance customer service and engagement. I can see people are starting to log in. So what I might do is just go through the housekeeping to start with before we get into the actual presentation itself. Okay. So, before we begin, for those that haven't been here before, welcome. We tend to record these webinars just so it's easier for you to go back over them in your own time. So please feel free to look at the recording and go through it, and don't worry about having to frantically write notes down about what we're doing and what you're seeing. There is a question panel on the right hand side of the go to webinar screen, so you'll be able to ask questions in there. So please feel free at any point to ask questions, and we've got a question and answer session at the end of the webinar just to kind of bring all the questions together. And then finally, we do have an exit survey that we tend to complete at the end of the webinar as well, which just kind of provides us with a little bit of insight into how you think the webinar was run and any ideas that you've got for future webinars as well. So again, please feel free to hang around for the exit survey and fill that in as well. So today I'm really pleased that we've got this webinar, which is looking at how GIS can enhance customer service and engagement. For those that don't know me, my name is Ian Usher. I'm a business development manager at CADcorp, and I look after our land and property sector, which concentrates mainly on the social housing side. And I know there's a lot of people on here that I already know, but welcome to those that I don't know. It'll be good to talk to you after the webinar. I'm now going to pass over to Simon, who's our pre-sales team leader, to introduce himself.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, my name's Simon Parker. I'm pre-sales team leader at CADcorp. And yeah, this morning I'll be demonstrating some use case examples of how GIS can enhance your customer service and engagement.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Simon. So what we tend to do now is we tend to turn our cameras off, just because it helps with the bandwidth of the presentation and the demonstration. But what I'll do is I'll turn mine back on for the questions and answer session at the end. Okay, so the agenda for today. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at we're going to give a couple of slides just to talk about who CADcorp are, which would be really good. Look at how GIS can be used in housing generally. We've got a number of use cases. We're then going to concentrate on how GIS can enhance customer service and engagement, providing loads of different examples of how that can be done. Before passing over to Simon, as like he said, he's going to demonstrate a couple of the use cases. And then right at the end, we've got key takeaways from the webinar, what the next steps are. And then we've also got a question and answer session at the end as well. And like I say, please feel free to drop questions in at any point and we'll go through them. So the first thing we like to do is to get you guys involved. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to launch the first of two questions that we've got. So the first one is going to ask, is your organization currently investing in GIS? So we like to ask this just to see if you're a user who is currently investing in GIS, which is great, and you've come in here today to kind of gain insight into how others can use it, which is fantastic. But for those that haven't, you might be coming to have a look at what others have been using it for and kind of see the use cases behind how others have been using GIS within their appropriate organization. So if you can respond yes, no, or unsure, then what I can do is I'll give it a couple more seconds and we can close that off in a second. So I'll give 5 more seconds, and then what I'll do is end that poll. So what I can see, or the numbers in front of me, say that a lot of you, 71% of you are currently investing in GIS, which is great. So you've come here today to kind of look at how you can optimize the use of GIS within your organization, specifically for the kind of customer service section, which is great. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to launch our second question. And when I click launch, so this one gets a bit more specific. So it says, does your organization provide a resident portal which may contain maps and spatial data? So we know talking to social housing providers, I know that there's a lot of residential portals that kind of give customers access to information, but maybe it's very tabular. So I'm interested to know in this side if there are maps and spatial data included as part of those portals that you've got. And it's fascinating watching these charts go up and down. Um, this one seems more of an even split, which is great. But I'll just give you another 5 seconds maybe to finish it off. And what I'll do is I'll end that poll now. So like I say, that's quite an even split. So we're saying there's 40% of you are saying no, but then 30% each are saying yes and unsure. So it's interesting that that you've come today to kind of look at how you might provide, or you can invest in GIS in order to kind of use it within a customer portal maybe, and we'll be able to go through these kind of aspects as we go through the presentation. So thank you very much for running through that poll. So, for those of you who are new to CAD Corp, I just thought I'd give you a bit of background before we get into the presentation. So, we're a UK-based software development company, and what we do is we create the spatial information system, and that provides a family of geospatial software which includes desktop, server, and web-based mapping applications. We provide software for GIS, but we also provide spatial data, which can also help with the supporting your organization with the geospatial strategy and corporate strategies as well. And what we do is we kind of work with customers within the land and property sector, local government and central government, finance, and then we've got emergency services customers, energy infrastructure and environment customers as well. What the spatial information system does that we provide is, like I say, it creates the desktop, web, and mobile-based mapping applications. All of the software that we create can be cloud hosted and managed by CAD Corp, or we do provide the flexibility of installing it on site. Or if you wanted, you could have an hybrid. We've got some customers who install desktop on site, and then they've got web mapping in the cloud. But the main strengths of the spatial information system is that we support lots and lots of different data formats. We can easily take the data and bring it in. We've got advanced functionality included as standard as part of the desktop, so things like routing and hotspotting are all included as part of the product. There's options for customizing and developing the applications themselves as well, and then we support all of the Ordnance Survey data. We're an Ordnance Survey data partner, so we support all of the Ordnance Survey data that you guys rely on in order to create your base mapping and analyze the data that you've got in front of you. And we work with lots and lots of different housing associations. I think there's about 35, 40 different housing associations that we work with. What I always use is the example of Teen Housing, at the bottom left on there. They work with, I think it's about 4,000 properties. And then in comparison, L&Q work with 140,000 properties. They've just merged with Trafford Housing Trust. But I suppose they're all these organisations, regardless of property size, are all using GIS to help them make informed decisions based on spatial data. So it doesn't matter how big they are, how small they are, they're all using GIS to gain those kind of improved decisions based on the information that they've got in front of them. And there are lots and lots of different uses in GIS, in housing for GIS. And we could talk about these all day. In fact, we could probably run a brand new webinar on all of these use cases. But what we're going to do today is we're going to concentrate on kind of the tenant engagement side and the customer services side as well. I suppose the way that the GIS in housing is run is through two different applications. So just to talk very briefly about these applications. So the first one is CAD Corp Sys Desktop. So this is more of a advanced user application that is used for creating, preparing, and analyzing spatial data. It supports lots and lots of different data formats, including the OS, the Ordnance Survey products. And like I say, there's advanced query tools and analysis included. So things like hotspotting, routing, temporal and clustering analysis can be completed as well. And this is the program that's used to create the projects that then get displayed to the website. So the CAD Corp Sys web map allows loads of different users to access plenty of different maps through a web browser really easily, and it's based on similarity to Google Maps, so it's very intuitive in the way that it works, and it's got a very user-friendly browser in order for you to be able to interrogate with the data. And it's simple and easy to use, so users will go on, interrogate the data, and then they'll move on to the next thing. I suppose it's also a responsive interface, so the application responds accordingly to the type of device that you're accessing it from. So we've got two images there of one using it on a laptop or a PC, and then the second one looking at it on a mobile device as well. Okay. So now we're going to get into the presentation. So you've all come here to understand how GIS can enhance customer service and engagement. So a lot of the data that social housing providers have is related to either an asset, a property, or an estate. And this makes social housing providers very spatial centric, in my opinion. Because the majority of the data is linked to typically an asset, there's lots of data available within other systems that can be brought together, such as you've got systems that identify damp and mold. You've got systems that have tenancy statuses or scheduled repairs or reports of ASB. There's lots and lots of examples of connecting to lots and lots of different data sets in order to amalgamate it and create a golden thread based on a single asset. And by leveraging the ability to visualize and analyze the spatial data that you've got, that empowers organizations like yourselves to provide a more personalized, efficient, and insightful customer experience. So on recent webinars that we've looked at, we've looked at how GIS can be used to help support objectives within corporate strategies. And a lot of the corporate strategies focus on improving the customer experience through the use of technology. It also looks at providing customer insights through technology, improving digital access for residents, improving tenant engagement, and these are all objectives that can be supported through the use of GIS. And these have all these kind of comments have come from different corporate strategies, but there's a lot of repeatable stuff that goes into them. So we kind of put this presentation together to go through how you can kind of meet these objectives that you've got within your corporate strategies. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at this from two different points of view. So firstly, from the customer point of view. So these are our new tenants who have just moved into our new property, and what they want to know is they want to have access to the data about the organization. So they're always going to have questions or specific needs, and providing them a portal where they can try and answer 90% of their requirements before they have to make contact with the customer contact team. And that's a really effective method of reducing the number of calls that your contact center receive. And then secondly, on the right hand side, we're going to look at how this works from the organization's point of view. So how the organization can use the power of GIS to ensure that residents are satisfied with the information that they receive, but also the services that they receive from the organization as well. So let's start with the customer. So if they want to engage with you through a portal, do you currently have any solutions to do that? And you've answered the question. So some of you know that they do have access. Some of you are saying that they do have access, but it's very tabular. And what we're saying is that maybe they should be looking at this from a spatial point of view. So from the conversations that I'm having with social housing providers, a lot of the questions that customers have are spatially driven. So we're going to look at this with multiple use cases that look at access to data and how you can provide kind of self-service tools as well. So straight away, one of the first big wins could be providing access to spatial data for customers. So this allows them to view information that is around them really easily and allows them to make their own decisions based on the technology that you provide. So this could include things like green space or community facilities such as supermarkets, doctors, bus stops, and lots more that I can think of. It might seem like a really trivial thing, but having access to this kind of information helps residents who might be new to an area understand what they have access to, and it also helps when residents are looking at moving into other tenancies and might not be used to an area. So straight away, they're getting that insight into an estate or a neighbourhood before they've either moved into the property or just after they've moved in, so they can start to look at kind of what community facilities we've got available to them. Spatial data can then be summarized using tools like local knowledge through WebMap. So the customer will be presented with spatial information straight away in an easy and understandable and intuitive format without having to do their own research. So there's no need for them to use WebMap to turn the data running off as they want. They can do, and they can do that quite happily, but this kind of summarizes the information straight away for users that just want to see data and the accessibility to it in a single click. So this could contain information such as where's my nearest primary school or secondary school, which is important to customers that have got a family. But then also it can contain information about where your nearest bus stop locations. But that's mainly more aimed at the customers who might not have access to their own vehicles. So you've got to think about how this kind of information is set up. They can also provide links to the information in this setup. So things like the bus stops might show you where the bus stop is, but then it can also provide links to the bus stop timetable, so they're not only seeing where the bus stop is, but they can also say actually the next bus is available in 10 minutes. So you're automatically providing that information straight away to the user really easily in an understandable format. And these are the kind of predetermined questions that can be provided to try and make it easier for customers to kind of access information through a self-service tool. And customers might also feel more involved if they've got tools that allow them to engage directly with the organization. So providing the customer with the ability to report problems such as overgrown grass or trees, fly tipping, grounds not being maintained can be easily fed back into the appropriate systems. So the customer feels more engaged because they've got the ability to report things while they're out on site within their estate or their neighborhood. But the organization is also benefiting from real-time data being reported of a number of different incidents that they can then action accordingly. And this method also reduces the multiple calls of the same incident, as users can already view the status of particular incidents that have been reported and looked into it. So user one reports that there's been a broken footpath. User two, who is out on site, can then see that, and instead of reporting it, looks to see if it's been done. There's a point that already exists and says, actually, this has been dealt with. So it reduces the number of calls that are coming into the organization for you to be able to deal with a particular problem as well. So we're now going to look at it from an organization point of view. So organizations want to provide a streamlined approach to customer service and improve that relationship that they have with the customer, and they can do this through the use of digital services like GIS. And we're going to look at the following use cases. So how they can provide answers to questions, providing status updates, which we kind of touched on a second ago, and then how they can use GIS proactively for things like tenant allocation and identifying, in this example, damp and mold. So for those customers who don't have access to technology or just prefer talking to the organization, you're always going to have a handful of users who want to talk to somebody at the end of the phone. The organization should be able to access the same kind of customer question. Well, should be able to answer the customer's question straight away. The customer typically has an address that they are interested in talking about. And so with the use of local knowledge service again, an organization can obtain key information straight away. So in this example, we're looking at local knowledge from an internal point of view and saying, well, this could contain information that shows what the current rent arrears are attached to a property, or the tenancy agreement, or the housing officer, or what the demographic of an area is. So it's been this in this example, the local knowledge has been developed with the idea of the organization in mind, so that when a customer rings up, the organization can enter the address and then retain and get the information straight back so that they can provide it to the end user over the phone. GIS can be used proactively to try and mitigate against problems or identify areas for concern in the future. So as we've said, in this example, after analysing reports of damp and mould, you may find patterns in the characteristics of the building types, or the proximity to possible flooding, or the repairs that have taken place recently. The technology allows you really easily to identify the areas that you consider might be at risk and manage the surveys accordingly, rather than providing a scattergun approach across the areas that you cover. So rather than you having to what you've identified that damp and mold is within your properties, you want to find out where it is across your whole stock rather than just having a full and scattergun approach. You could say, based on these characteristics, based on the proximity to flooding, based on the fact that they've had recent repairs, we know that these are more likely to do it. So let's use that to identify a risk area so that we can survey these properties first to make sure that there's nothing happening in this particular area. And that allows you to focus on the data, and that helps you make those informed decisions on where to look at first, to avoid kind of those, or try and mitigate against those things occurring. And I suppose GIS also provides a vital tool in providing a proactive resident allocation. So your organisation understand your tenants better than anybody else. So you've got a really good understanding of who your ideal tenants are. You know the type of customer you want to place in a tenancy. You know the demographic. You know the nationality. You know if they've got access to vehicles, and you know if they've got a family to support. What you don't want to do is allocate a resident who is limited access to a private vehicle to an area where public transport is very limited. And likewise, you don't want to allocate a tenant of a certain nationality to an area where there are no other customers of that same nationality, which will make it hard for them to feel involved within that community or the neighbourhood. So things like the census data, mosaic data, and fuel poverty data can all help in proactively allocating your customers correctly, or certainly trying to get that balance right. And then finally, so reported incidents to the organisation allow you to view patterns in spatial information. So things like where slips and trips have been, or where antisocial behaviour is being reported, allows you to look into possible causes and identify areas for concern before they get worse. So in this example of slips and trips, it might be a loose paving slab that needs replacing, or in the event of ASB, it might be your community officers need to show presence within the areas where they are being reported. So it all helps with the overall analysis that the organisation can provide and try to mitigate against before anything else happens. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pass over to Simon, who's going to look at kind of how GIS can be used to enhance the customer service from a customer point of view, with the headings of kind of viewing data, using reporting services and self-service tools. And they'll look at it from an organisation point of view in order to answer those common questions quickly, the proactive use of it, and then the analysis of the kind of reported problems. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give Simon access to share his screen. And it's over to you.
Thank you, Ian. So as Ian just described, my demonstration is going to be split into two parts. So the first part, I'm going to show you some examples on how GIS can be used to enhance your customer service experience. And then for the second part, share some examples on how it can improve your engagement with customers. So web mapping is a great platform for sharing information and services to your customers or residents, and this approach has actually been widely adopted by local authorities across the UK. And the sort of key driver for them was to enable self-service, so to encourage residents to access information through digital channels rather than sort of contact them directly through a contact centre. And from our sort of recent discussions with social landlords, there's a real appetite to adopt a similar approach. So I'm going to share with you two use case examples this morning. And the first one, let's say I'll take a role of a customer who wants to find out information about grounds maintenance. There's a problem with an overgrown area of grass on my estate, and I want to report it to my landlord as a problem. So I've gone onto their website, I've hit a link, and then I'm presented with a map. So this is the interface for the CAD Corp web map application. And as I described, it's a platform for sharing map-based information. And me as a visitor, when I've accessed a map, I've actually been presented with this initial pop-up dialogue. And in the dialogue, it's just basically informing me as a resident, I can use this map to view the areas of ground maintenance my social landlord is responsible for maintaining. It also tells me that if I have an issue with one of these areas, I can use the map to report the issue to them. Alternatively, if I find that the area that I've discovered a problem with isn't actually under the management of my social landlord, it advises me that I can contact my local authority instead in the first instance. And then underneath, I've actually had some pointers to basically tell me as a resident, how I can navigate the map with my mouse. If I access this magnifying glass icon, I can use it to search for a location using a postcode. And then if I do want to report an issue to my landlord, I can access the relevant menu using this icon here. So in the map itself, I actually want to find my property where I live. So in the top right-hand corner, we're going to access that magnifying glass, and it advised me it's a postcode search. So I'm going to type in the postcode of my property. It goes away, finds some results based on my search. I can select the result from the list, and then the application takes me to where my property is. So I've now found my property. So let's say I'm living at number 16 here, and I can also see these sort of coloured areas here on the map. And these are the sort of areas of sort of grounds maintenance that are managed by my landlord. And it's actually this particular area here which I've got an issue with. So this grass is overgrown. I can see it's managed by my social landlord. So I now want to report this to my landlord, and I can do this using the map. So in the top left-hand corner, it advises if I select this icon, I can access the reporting capability. Now from the drop-down list, I can say, yep, I want to report an issue with grounds maintenance. Now this drop down can have multiple issue types, so you may wish to allow residents to report maybe, I don't know, fly tipping incidents within your estates, or maybe occurrences of slips and trips, for example. And then underneath, I'm going to say, I'm going to click on the map to report the location of the overgrown grass. So I'm going to click on that grass area and then go to the next part of the form. Now, the next part of the form basically asks me to provide some details to accompany my reports. Now, this form is configurable. The social landlord can decide the content of the form, and the form also supports mandatory fields and also drop-down fields with predefined values. So, as a resident, I can start completing the form. So let's type in my name. We'll add in some contact details. I'll submit a date, so this is where I'm reporting this particular issue. I've got a little drop down here, so what is the issue related to? So I've got some options to select from. So yep, it's related to grass, and then it asks, can I provide some details? So I'm just going to say this is overgrown grass, and then there is also an option to include an image as well. So perhaps I've taken a picture on my mobile device. I can include that as evidence as part of my report submission. And then when I click next, the last thing it's going to ask is an email address. So just another form of sort of a contact detail. So let's put in my email address, little security check there, and then I can hit send at the bottom. Now that report has been submitted to my landlord, and that report gets stored in a database. And there's also an option where you can have a notification email. So that gets sent internally within the organization to let either an individual or a team know that report has been submitted. So the resident can now leave the map. They've done their bit for the community, and it's only taken them a short amount of time to do it. Now, if I just sort of refresh the map, I just maybe zoom in and out a little bit, the map actually has a dynamic link to the report data. Now, the reason I've chosen to display the reports on the map is for the benefit of future visitors to the map. So I might be another resident within the local area who wants to do the same thing and report the overgrown area of grass to my landlord. But when I look on the map, I can already see that someone has already reported the problem. So they don't need to report an issue that has obviously already been reported. So that has saved the resident time, and also the landlord also doesn't receive sort of duplicated reports for the same issue. Now, the workflow I have just demonstrated can also be performed on a mobile or tablet device. excuse me. We know that not everybody has access to a computer, but many more will have access to a smartphone, so they can do the same on these devices as well. However, as sort of Ian described, you still get calls to your contact center, but there's nothing stopping your contact center colleagues from using the map for their own benefit. So a caller wants to report an overgrown area of grass. Your colleagues can, locate the area in question on the map from the caller's description. They can validate whether it's your responsibility, and if it is, then they can log the issue, and it will help them deal with the call more efficiently, and also at the first port of call, because you can imagine if they didn't have a map, they might just have to take some notes down, and then forward them on to someone else who then will have to investigate that further. So yeah, that is just sort of one use case for sharing information and improving that customer experience. Now, the second example I want to share is an example that I've actually seen on social landlord websites, and it's a map which simply shares information about the location of your schemes and properties. So, as a new or existing customer, I can see where you have these schemes. Now, you can use a mouse to move around the map. And you can, if I zoom into this particular scheme, if I clicked on the scheme on the map, on the left-hand side, I can see some of the details about that scheme. So in this example, it tells me how many houses there are. Does it have any parking? Is there any current availability? And maybe whether there's any sort of accessible housing included in this scheme. But if I zoom out a little bit more, I've also seen examples where you're sharing available properties with a map as well. So let's turn on a second example, which shows available properties. And this is really handy as a customer or a resident to explore the map and see where these available properties might be, whether they are properties to rent, or maybe they are shared ownership opportunities. Now, maybe I'm interested in this particular property, so we can zoom into the map to just look at the location of that property in a bit more detail. This time, if I click on the property, it gives me a few sort of nuggets of information. So it tells me where it is. It's a house. It's got 3 bedrooms. It also includes a link to Street View, so I could look at the property location in this platform, and yep, I can see there's some off-street parking there for my car. However, I am new to this area. I've not lived here before. I'm not very familiar with the area, so I've got no idea what amenities are available nearby. So this property is only going to be suitable, if it is close to specific amenities. Now, there are many open data sets available that you can share with your customers to show local information, and you can make these available to view on the map alongside your property. So as a customer, I could view on the map where these nearest services are. So just as an example, here I've got an overlay showing the locations of GPs. So I can see where the nearest doctor surgeries are in relation to this particular property. But as an alternative option, you could use a service like Local Knowledge to provide similar answers, but a lot quicker. Now, in the top left-hand menu, if I access Local Knowledge, in basically clicks, Local Knowledge gives me an overview of how accessible nearby amenities are to this particular location. So if I've got young children, I can see there are 2 primary schools that are very close by. If I've got older children, yep, I can see there's a secondary school 2.5 kilometers away. We've already seen on the map, we've got a choice of GPs nearby. I can also see we've got some bus stops that are very close by as well. And I can hit this icon here just to see the locations of those bus stops in relation to this particular property. And then I think in the last example, I can also see we've got some supermarkets that are nearby as well. So local knowledge here is giving me that sort of quick snapshot about this property and what is available in the local area. And as a prospective customer, I can evaluate the suitability of this property before I make a bid for its tenancy. So it's just another great way where you can use web mapping, and in this example, using local knowledge to improve that customer experience, because we're giving them a digital platform where they can view those available properties and use local knowledge as that self-service sort of mechanism to find that information and enable them to make those informed decisions. So in this case, is a property suitable for my needs? Should I bid for it? Yes or no? Now, for the second part of my demonstration, let's take a look at some use case examples where your colleagues can benefit from web mapping as well. And I'm going to start off by looking at the use of demographic data. Now, demographic data is a study of population-based factors, and we're lucky in the UK that there's a wealth of open data that we can tap into to help us with our business objectives. And I was reading a document from Public Health England, which discussed the use of different data sets to help tackle health risks from cold homes. And at this time of year, especially, cold homes is a significant problem because living in a cold home has a significant impact on people's health. And there are two aspects to the problem. You've got the property itself. Is it energy efficient? Does it have adequate heating? And then you've got the social aspect. So does the customer have the financial resources to pay for a sufficient energy supply? Perhaps they need to use heating a lot, particularly where there are pensioners, maybe young children, and maybe people with a disability. Now, you may have your own internal data to help you meet this challenge and identify the most vulnerable, but there are also some open data sets that you can work with as well. And for this first example, here I've got the indices of multiple deprivation, and this is a useful indicator of deprivation levels by lower super output area, and it uses several different variables to calculate the deprivation level for an LSOA. So in England, there are over, I think it's 32,000 LSOAs, and the index ranks them from 1 being the most deprived to 32,000 odd as the least deprived. And I've mapped the sort of the index to show, we can see on the legend here on the left-hand side, that the darker shades of blue are the most deprived areas in the country. And you can then overlay your property points on top just to see how they reside within these particular ranked areas. But there are also subsets of this data, and this one focuses on income deprivation affecting older people, so including those who are out of work and those who are in work but with low incomes. And then the sort of second subset I'm just going to quickly show on deprivation is that they also have one looking at income deprived families with children. There's also an open data set around fuel poverty. You can search for this on data.gov.uk, and it's an indicator of households being fuel poor. So they are fuel poor if they live in a D-rated property for energy efficiency, and then when they spend the required amount to heat their home, they're left with an income below the official poverty line. So here, yep, just tells us a percentage within fuel poverty within each of these LSOA areas. I also tried to find an open data set for winter payments as well, because I thought this might be a useful data set to tap into. I did find one on data.gov.uk, which tells you how many households have received winter payments, but the smallest geography the information is available at the moment is the parliamentary sort of constituency level, which we can see on the map here. And I was hoping for something more granular, but you might still find this particular data set really useful. And then, of course, you could marry all of this information together with EPC ratings as well, and maybe focus on the sort of the worst for energy efficiency. So if I sort of pick on this particular property, this G-rated property, and if I zoom into the map, I've done some analysis for each of these properties. Now, for each property, I found out where the property resides within those ranked sort of deprivation levels that I described to you. And I've just used a label in this case to share that insight. So for this particular property and its location, it falls within the overall IMD rank within the most deprived 40 to 50% bracket within England in this example. However, looking at the income deprivation of households for or where there are children and older people, it actually ranks far worse. So these types of data sets are available to you, and they can be used to help sort of build up a picture of your neighbourhoods and help you target your engagement with customers who might need the most help. On a related topic, identifying risk to damper mold is another sort of area of significant activity, and you might have your own data about historic and current reporting of damper mold. And because this information is associated to a property, you can display these locations on the map to gain that valuable geographical insight into the problem. And at a simple level, you can look at the spread of the problem, but more importantly, you can identify locations where the problem might be more prevalent. So in the centre of Brighton here, I've got a noticeable group of damper mod reports. So if I now zoom into into the map, and we can actually see some of these properties are very close to each other, and we can use this information here to maybe delve deeper into these properties, because there might be a high probability that they are very similar properties in nature, because they might be made of the same construction materials. Maybe they've got the same interior heating systems. Maybe they have the same types of windows and doors installed, for example. And if we have these sort of known issues, it gives us that picture of common characteristics, and we can use this information to target similar properties in our stock, whether that be prioritizing retrofit options, or maybe targeted advice to these customers on how lifestyle behaviors can also help reduce the risk. So it's just an example here of using a map to understand if there's a geographical pattern to the issue, and enabling a more sort of proactive investigation to intervene early. Now, antisocial behavior is another issue where you can be proactive with mapping, and in a similar vein to the previous example, showing the location of ASB incidents might identify troublesome areas. And there are a variety of ways of sharing analysis with mapping. And this example is a hotspot. And this might be more insightful than showing loads of points on a map, because it can highlight areas where there's been a high volume of ASB in a close vicinity. So in this example, the red and sort of orange areas tell us this might be a problem area for us. So it gives us that insight to focus on these areas as a priority. Now, for my penultimate use case this morning, Ian mentioned earlier that you could use demographic information to help facilitate the allocation of customers to properties. And there are many factors that influence the suitability of a property to a customer. But I'm only going to focus on one right now, and that is accessibility. Now, not everybody has access to their own car, whether that be for financial reasons, maybe a health issue, or maybe for environmental concerns. So it's important for them to have access to public transport. So here are the locations of all of my properties, and I'm going to focus on a group of properties here to the east of Brighton. And I've also got available an overlay showing the locations of bus stops. So these are these green squares. Now, I've read sort of many studies sort of out in the public domain which recommend a suitable walking distance to a bus stop is 400 meters. And using the location of bus stops and a network layer of roads and pathways, you can use GIS to work out how far a 400-meter walking distance takes you from each bus stop. And the output of that analysis can look a little bit like this. So a visual to show what a 400-meter walking distance might look like. And this is a useful piece of work which can look at the accessibility of properties to local public transport, and the suitability of properties for specific customer requirements. And just to finish off my demonstration this morning, I've got one more example to share with you. And I've actually gone sort of full circle in my demonstration, because I'm now going to sort of just refer back to the reporting capability that I showed you at the beginning. Now, one of our customers, specifically the health and safety team for this particular organization, they spoke about the potential use case for using Report It. And it actually isn't one that I'd actually come across before. Now, they could see the benefit of using the reporting function for residents to report when they might have had a slip or trip within a communal area or in and around an estate. And they wanted to be able to see where these particular incidents were occurring. So in this example, I'm using a cluster theme to visualize these locations, and the counts here basically tells us how many incidents have been reported within these areas. So if I focus on this group of 8 incidents, we can see it just sort of splits into a 5 and 3 split here. So I'm going to zoom in a bit more, focus on these 5 incidents here on the map. Now, the example the customer provided, it was based on trips on footpaths. So many of their footpaths are blocked paving. So they get occurrences where the paving breaks up and lifts, causing those trip hazards. And they wanted to use a map to identify areas where these types of incidents have occurred too many times, so they could then facilitate inspections of these problem areas and where appropriate, recommend the replacement of footpaths to prevent any further slips and trips occurring. So after that final point, I've now just come to the end of my demonstration this morning. So I hope it's given you some ideas on how mapping can provide opportunities to enhance your customer experience by sharing information through a digital channel and providing those opportunities for customers to self-serve. And I've also shared some ideas how mapping location data like demographic information or incident data like the ASB and the slips and trips example here, how it can provide you that valuable insight to help you engage and improve services that you provide to your customers. So thank you for watching my demonstration. I'm now going to pass you back to Ian for the remainder of this webinar. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Simon. So as Sam said, just to kind of summarise, GIS can be used for lots and lots of different functions, but a very high level, it can be used for viewing spatial data, allowing customers to report problems, providing self-service tools, and then both internally and externally, it can be used to answer questions very quickly and allow organizations to analyze spatial data in order to make more informed business decisions based on spatial data that the organization has access to. So if you're now sat there thinking, what are my next steps? You've got two options. Well, actually three options. We can provide a proposal for customer service efficiency, which provides off-the-shelf web mapping that you can provide to members of the public in order for them to start using spatial data as they go-to place to find information about the organisation. And at the same time, we can also provide a proposal for customer engagement, which concentrates on more around the functionality that we've shown today. So the local knowledge and report function that you can use for kind of that customer engagement side of it. And then if you're not sure which is best for your organization, or you want to talk through the challenges that you've got, I'm more than happy to set up a Teams meeting so that we can go through kind of your thoughts and ideas, and we can definitely suggest kind of the best way forward. Okay. So as we promised, we've got a question and answer session. I can see that there has been a couple of questions as we've been going through. I think looking at them, there's two of them that are kind of based around the same kind of question. So Steve has asked, how many versions can you set up, which is a very broad question. But then looking at the questions, there's Jamie's also asked for your website for residents, is this using an external facing site or is it an internal portal which is held behind firewalls, and how are residents able to access this? So I think I can try and answer this in the same answer. So within the web map, we've shown two examples. So we've shown an internal one and an external version. You can have as many different versions of the web mapping as you want. So our customers generally tend to have a web map install, and then they'll have a web map for their repairs team, for their development team, for their tree team, all with different types of data that's being displayed. Generally the way that it works with our residents portal is that it's accessed anonymously, so they can just log in and access the data. But I suppose the biggest assurance I can give you is that the data that gets displayed is only for the end user. So you've got the organization's got full control in the kind of security that gets added in terms of the internal version, but also the attributes that are being displayed in the external version. So you've got full control in kind of like fully limiting what users can see and what they can access to, regardless of whether it's internal or external. So I kind of hope that answers kind of both questions at the same time. And then just looking again, so we've got a question from Will, which is asking where is the data shown coming from. So I think that came through about when Simon was talking about the open data. So CADCorp have got an open data service that takes a number of open data suppliers' information and creates that in order to provide to organisations. So it's a really good way of us kind of managing that service and you guys getting up to date data from the likes of the Environment Agency for flooding or Historic England for the conservation areas, British Geographical Survey for kind of the lay of the land and stuff like that. So it's a really good way of you getting access to direct information straight away. And using the tools that we've shown today, you can effectively load in your stock along the lines with the open data, and straight away you've got access to information that shows where your properties might be at risk from flooding from the Environment Agency, for example. So it's a really good way of kind of getting that information out to you. That looks like the only 3 questions that we've had so far, which is great. But if you have got any more, remember we've got the exit survey. So if you think something is on your way out, please feel free to go through the exit survey. I suppose my last slide is just to say thank you again for joining us today. It's really appreciated that you can you've got time to spend to one side and just go through kind of what we are demonstrating. So thank you again. This is the first in a series of webinars. So the next webinar that we're going to look at, which is going to be co-hosted with the Ordnance Survey, is going to look at how OS data and GIS can help social housing providers combat pressing issues. So we're going to look at things like damp and mold and sustainability and things like that with the help of the Ordnance Survey. So that one should be really good. And then right at the end, we're going to or the final webinar, I should say, is going to be looking at how we can kind of how you guys can build a business case for GIS within housing. So we're going to look at how we can bring all this information together and build a really good business case in order for you to look at engaging within GIS within the organisation. So again, thank you very much for attending today. There will be an email sent with a link to register for all of these webinars, and please don't forget to the exit survey on your way out if you've got any last minute questions or want any more information. And thank you very much for attending. My contact details are on the screen if anybody wants to have a chat, and I will hopefully see you at the next webinar. Thank you very much.